case you're wondering.
No,
We might have 10 more people, we might have 2 more.
okay. And do you have copies, or are there all?
They're going to bring it in, I think.
Okay, good.
Usually our host here at Lifepro, she'll bring over a canister of coffee. Oh, yeah, you want to.
Good. There.
Okay,
And then
testing.
go wherever is comfortable for you. Pocket, belt.
Cool.
hand.
It's this crazy shirt. Let's do it in the pocket. I can sit down with that, yeah.
Yep.
All right. We're live. There we go. And then that'll switch. So good afternoon. Welcome to the first 2019 Care Services meeting. There's been some discussion last month about my true identity, so I just want to put that to rest. I'm behind Santa Claus, so I'm obviously too tall for that position. And so I gotta turn this down, or it's gonna totally distract me. So I did have an awkward situation. On Christmas morning, my wife announced she was gonna post on Facebook that she slept with Santa. And I thought that was funny at first, but then I realized I'd been out with Rudolph all night, so I wonder who was at my house. So we'll put all that to bed. And I was going to start out with a couple of video clips. Our topic today is navigating information on ALS, and that could be huge. So we're going to narrow it down to printed materials from the ALS Association National, and just make you aware of what resources are available in that regard. So we're going to start off with a clip from a 2019 January Ask the Expert video that features Dr. John Ravitz from UCSD, the Certified Center of Excellence Clinic here in San Diego.
For
And some of the audio
and then we're going to have our panel come up and each do a speech.
is a little weak, but it gets
about
stronger.
5 minutes, and
Nothing
then
we
do
can do
a
about it.
10-minute Q&A after their topics. So I would like to introduce Dr. John Ravitz. He is a professor of clinical neuroscience at UCSD, and he will be talking about the first topic in the agenda. So thank you again.
It's got to get louder. Yeah, we have it on maximum. When they recorded the video.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I thought I was going to speak for 45 minutes with a detailed scientific, but about 10 minutes, what I'd like to do is about 10 minutes to just tell you a little bit about my perspective on dealing with ALS, and then open it up to questions, because I think those are the liveliest and most important part of the presentation. So I think I called the presentation today Navigating Difficult Waters. And the reason I chose that topic is because I've been dealing with ALS as a clinical neurologist for, gosh, I don't want to say how many decades, but about 30 years. And so during that time, I have seen lots of questions, and I feel like I have a pretty good appreciation for what patients are going through as they're getting diagnosed and as they're going through the navigating through their disease. And I know how complicated it is. And so I'm going to try to point out how I like to guide people and to guide them through the journey of the disease. And as I think about it, I always, in my mind, divide ALS into kind of 3 phases. And probably the most important and most difficult and the most artful as a clinical neurologist is dealing with the diagnosis. And I have a private theory that's will be hard to prove, but I think that the quality of life of an ALS patient is determined by the way the diagnosis is made and presented. And it doesn't really matter whether the patient has a rapid course or a very slow course. The delicacy of those early months, to me, is the most critical, so that patients can get their arms around their diagnosis emotionally and come to terms with it. And I think so there's a huge role for the neurologist in that process, and I'll come back to that. So let's just talk a little bit about that. So what I've learned is that many patients are fairly abruptly and bluntly told the diagnosis. And for something this complicated, for most people relatively unknown at the time of the diagnosis, it can be a very jarring experience. And yet if it's done gently, and it's a process that sometimes takes months, sometimes takes years, but if it's done in a gentle way and to transition the patients into the diagnosis, then there can be an acceptance and there can be a real spirit, to then go on and deal with the disease. So I have different tricks in which I try to do that. But just to emphasize that, to me, stage 1 is really presenting the diagnosis and making the patient and their family and everybody not necessarily at peace with it, but to kind of come to grips with with what they have before them. And so some of the ways in which I do that is I ask the patient, what do you think is wrong? You've been having problems with walking or talking or with your coordination or whatever, and what do you think is going on? And that's hugely important for me because it tells me where they're at. And I oftentimes will then go around, I see many of my own patients here, so you can tell me if I did the same to you, as I'll go around to everybody in the room, family or who's ever accompanying them, and ask everybody to sort of tell me what they think, so that I know then where I should begin my discussion. And as you can imagine, I hear all kinds of things from people knowing exactly what they have to people not knowing and not being relatively clueless about what's going on. And so at least I know where to begin, and that's a critical step in discussing with patients. Turns out most of the time, ALS is not a difficult diagnosis for a clinical neurologist. So sometimes there's a lot of testing, but oftentimes it's not hard, or by the time they get to me and they've had testing and important preliminary testing and things like that, then I'm not confused by the diagnosis. The important thing is to present the diagnosis. Okay, then the second stage, which is the really roll up your sleeves and go to work, is really what you're going to hear more about today, is caring for the patients, because that's really the vital part of what we do in a multidisciplinary clinic, is deal with the issues that are related to communications and balance and nutrition and so on. And for that, there's an incredible team. My folks here at UCSD are going to be talking to you, and you'll have plenty of chance to hear about their perspective and what they do and they'll help answer your questions. And then at some point for many patients, we all know where it's heading, and it gets into advanced stages and it gets more delicate in terms of the discussion. I'm not here to talk about that because I actually don't like talking about it to a patient until it's really time to have more advanced discussions. But that's my duty as well. But the challenge for me is if you have those discussions early, it's a downer, and there's so much life before the disease advances that you're kind of eclipsing and losing track of what's really important. And so the key thing for the patient is to keep active, to keep doing everything that you possibly can do, and stay and do the stuff that's fulfilling. And that's true for all of us, but it's particularly true for the ALS patient, and not to be too focused on the negative aspects. So the way the ALS Association always talks about that is living with ALS, not dying with ALS. And I think that's so true. And certainly, I think for the patients, getting into advanced discussions is not appropriate, because you want to do all the medical care that you can do while it's appropriate, and that can be for several years or longer, and some patients will go into remissions. So there's all these sorts of positive things that can happen, and so again, not to get too far ahead and to keep people energized.
So that's part of probably a 4.5-hour video from the 2016 Ask the Expert presentation. It's a worthwhile view. You listen to individual members of the multidisciplinary team present their role at the clinic and the question and answers with the live audience. This is an event that occurs annually throughout California, different locations. It's combined where all the researchers, including people like Dr. Ravitz and Don Cleveland here in San Diego and some of the biomedical technical firms, all come together and have a summit and exchange what's been going on since the last time they met. And then part of that, at the end, they do an Ask the Expert with the local care team. So there's one 2016, 15, 17, 18, and they'll be recording one this Saturday, just up the highway here in, I believe it's in Irvine. So a lot of information there for folks. Opening up this was just to kind of give an intro to our presentation today. One of the things he says later is find a home, find a medical team, and stay with them. It's okay to get second opinions. People do that. Not a problem. But get grounded somewhere and follow the process through. If you're not able to access a multidisciplinary team, we'll help you establish that comprehensive care within whatever system you're in. So the key is to understand what the team is and their roles, and then you can duplicate that if you're unable to go to a single event where you have 3 hours of about 9 different appointments back to back. Whereas if you're doing it on your own, you might be driving to 7 or 8, 9 appointments one-on-one. But you can still get the care. So the next video clip, and this will be the last one, is from a Certified Center of Excellence neurologist just up the highway. And I'll let him speak for himself here. Dr. John Miller.
We have a few minutes for questions before I bring
And again, the video will
Dr.
get
Miller
louder
and his team up.
when they make their
Or
adjustments.
we can go straight to Dr. Miller, which would be fine with me. But if anyone has any questions? Okay, then I welcome Dr. Scott Miller. Did we have the bio on Dr. Miller?
And these lengthy Ask the
I needed to
Expert
step away for a second.
videos are
So
not
I'm going to
edited.
just wing this
So
for
feel
a
free
second
to jump
because
when you
I
see
want
their
to say that when I
switching
found out that we
speakers
were
and so
doing an
forth.
Ask the Experts and that I got to be the one
The
to
first
invite
7
the
minutes
speakers
of
for
ours,
today,
they don't even realize
there
the
was
mic's on.
absolutely
So
no
it's kinda cute.
hesitation in my mind that I would be inviting Dr. Scott Miller and his team to present today. I've had the honor of being able to visit clinics throughout California, and every one of them offers something special, every one of them. But what I witnessed at Dr. Miller's clinic that was particularly unique was a level of human concern that I had not witnessed at any of the other clinics that I think is really exceptional. And so I'm so honored and so delighted that you accepted the invitation. I think you'll enjoy his presentation today, and welcome Dr. Miller and your team.
So if you search YouTube for Ask the Expert ALS.
Well, thank you very much,
Our
Matt.
Golden West chapter.
Well, good afternoon,
You'll find
everybody.
them in a
It's a
heartbeat.
privilege to
We
be
have
here to
these
speak
links
with you today and to be the
available.
first lecturer at the ALS Association's Ask the Expert Conference. I was honored to accept the Commitment to
And
Care
again, the
Award
audio
at
will
the
get
ALS
louder in just a
Association's
moment.
One Starry Night Gala over the summer, and very humbled if I was asked to speak with you all today. When asked what topic to cover, I was simply told, whatever you talk about when you're seeing your ALS patients. Well, I have two goals for our day. The first is to awaken, and the other is to inspire. So here we go. So the topic of my talk is the human side to facing ALS, followed by the practical
really
tips
think he's
given by
outside
our
of
social
LA
worker,
somewhere.
Julie Ziegler, and our
don't-
case manager, Barbara Myers.
No, he's
We'll then hand
definitely
it back to me for some concluding remarks,
Golden West
followed by a
territory,
brief
North
video.
Orange County.
I will share with you all my own vulnerable experience as a medical student seeing my first ALS patient struggling with ALS, the emotions that I felt, and the lessons that I learned. I will then review our mission statement of our ALS clinic with our goal of providing
Yeah, it's gonna-
holistic
it's-
care
yeah, we're just
and
hanging in
conclude
there.
with some lessons that I've learned from my
The
patients,
audio technical guy
as well as
said
some
just
day-to-day advice.
be patient. So
Today,
it's
we're
frustrating.
going to hear much about the latest research updates, the clinical side of ALS, and our steps towards finding that elusive cure. However, now, we're going to address the emotional, the spiritual, and the mental challenges that can occur beyond the physical disease.
If we could at least have captions, it would be better.
So a little bit about me. I'm probably the only speaker here today who will say I'm not an ALS expert. I didn't do a fellowship in neuromuscular disease, nor am I a researcher. However, I'm asked here today, as over the years of running an ALS clinic, I've become an expert at treating those afflicted with ALS. In all honesty, the clinical care involved in ALS is not very complicated. The challenge, however, is to prepare people to live a meaningful life with ALS. I've been a neurologist at Kaiser Permanente South Bay Medical Center since 2008. I'm currently the chief of neurology, as well as the medical director of our ALS clinic since our inception in 2011. I've taken the journey with dozens of ALS patients over the years, and I've learned so much from every patient that I've ever known. I actually don't
Well.
believe that I take care of patients as I see them as extended family members. I was a psychology major in college, and I went to Tufts University School of Medicine in Boston, which had a little bit of a different take on what it means to be a physician. My professors taught me very valuable lessons, such as you don't treat a disease.
Okay, I'm thinking we're going to abort that attempt. The audio is just not coming on for us. We did play this about an hour ago, and we did not have such a long problem, but it is what it is. So I'll have the link that. It's really a worthwhile listen to Dr. John Miller. If that's something you're inclined to do, we'll get you the link. And when you play it on your own system and your own TV or a computer, it has good audio quality. Okay. So when I picked the topic, navigating information on ALS, one of the places I went to is, of course, the American Academy for Neurology, and I found this book, which we already have a copy of from many years ago, and they stole my title, so I'm not sure who got it first, but there is a lot of material out there, and you know, obviously we recommend you try to get information from credible sources. But if you get information from other sources, patients like me, ALS Insights, there's a whole slew of information on the internet. That's okay. But what we encourage you to do is talk to your medical team. If you're reading things that have piqued your interest and you want to try the Diana protocol diet or some other supplements or cannabis or whatever, our encouragement is talk to your medical team. Keep them involved in whatever you're doing and trying so that they're part of the process. Keep a close connection with your primary care provider as well. That's helpful to everybody involved to have that relationship. And you can get books like this from the neurology American Academy of Neurology and get a lot of information as well for those who might choose to do that. Come on. And we don't want this guy. So what we have, and now I think I will put this on the slide. Okay. So my tabs are gone, but that's okay. So what the ALS Association has done is published a whole slew of Living with ALS resource guides. And I wouldn't sit down and read all 12 of them in one sitting. But when you have questions, they're handy. And if you have a specific question, ask us. Because we probably know, hey, that's guide number 6, page 23, you know? And we can bounce back and answer, and then I'm trying to get myself and people I work with oriented is finish the answer with chapter and verse. You know, which guide, what page number, and then at the back of these is a huge amount of references, which can take you into other materials for something you want to dig deep into. Sometimes the most popular guide is number 6, Managing Symptoms of ALS. So you're experiencing a particular issue, it's probably in here, and it probably has some tips to help you. And if nothing else, help you formulate questions for your medical team. What can happen, and my clients have told me this, is they come into their medical appointment, they get so caught up in the exam and the exchange that's happening real time, the questions they wanted to ask never get asked. They go home, and on the way home, oh, I meant to ask about this, I meant to ask about that, and now they're waiting for the next appointment. So a couple tricks to address that is to, number 1, take somebody with you who can be more detached from what's happening and capture information, and also maybe come with your questions to make sure they get asked before the appointment's over. The other thing that I know the medical community finds really helpful, send your questions in advance. You know, most of them have encrypted email systems that are within their network, like MyChart, UCSD, or MyChart, Sharp, where you can send a private email to your physician or the nurse and say, hey, here's my 6 questions. And I've heard people say, don't let them go more than 6 because they'll get 25 questions. And yeah. Get your 6 most important or 3 most important issues. Send them in advance so that your medical team knows what's on your mind when you're coming in the door. And then they can help you and everybody not forget to address those issues before the appointment's over. Okay?
Kaiser's starting to do that.
So for our webcast audience, you say Kaiser starting to do that?
Kaiser Permanente, Walnut Creek,
Okay.
Dr. Jirla.
So in Walnut Creek, Kaiser, they're encouraging folks to send in their questions. It's a good system.
We have a link to the doctor.
To the doctor? Okay.
Yeah, so I thought that was really
All right, awesome. So we'll use this for future questions so people can hear it who are watching from home. So we talked about the multidisciplinary team approach in your care. So what is that? Well, here it is. We've got a guide that explains to you all the individuals that would be part of a team, what their role is, and if you're not able to access a multidisciplinary team, who are all the people you probably should be seeing? Well, right here on the wheel. So if you're outside of a clinic, but you want to get that kind of comprehensive care, which is statistically shown to improve quality of life and longevity, get appointments with all these people. Have your primary care physician, your neurologist make referrals. So within your health net system, you can go see these folks. And again, that's important to tell them why you're coming and that you have this diagnosis. If you go see a physical therapist who isn't familiar with our situation, they're going to want to do rehab. That's their life. We're looking for range of motion, totally different thing. So rather than go to an appointment and be frustrated with the result, tell them ahead of time, hey, this is my diagnosis. If you're not familiar with this, just tell me. We'll find somebody else. It's okay. We understand it's a rare disease, and not everybody you talk to is going to be terribly familiar with it, including your primary care physician, frankly. They just don't see it. So just a little tip there that we hear from our patients. For those who find it helpful, we do have the guides in Spanish, so they're available. And there's a whole family of webinars and recorded video from across the nation available at our national website. So again, when people ask questions about a particular topic, respiratory or breathing in ALS, for example, in addition to the guides, because not everybody is a reader, some people are more visual in their intake, we have the videos, and they can go watch a webinar. They can watch prior versions of these. And these are just out. They showed up at our office yesterday. We've been waiting for them. And these are information about ALS for children and young adults. So we start here, and then a little higher age group, and then young adults. So finally some good materials available for the rest of the family. The timing of this is incredible. Yesterday, one of our family's daughter brought in her book that she wrote for little kids, toddlers. She experienced, her father was diagnosed when she was 3.5 years old. So here we are, fast forward about maybe 18 years later, she has written and published a book for kids. So we'll have those shortly, and they'll be available. It's really a great resource. And there is a family guide. Let's see. Oh, you guys got it? That's fine. Yeah. So Families in ALS is guide number 12.
I've got one.
She's
But you said it was thicker than the ones I had.
So we do have them. They're PDF files available online.
Yeah.
We do have some hard copies available, and they're excellent resources. So we just want folks to be aware of what's out there and ask questions. If I have one message for people to take home today, is talk to your medical team. I'll share a couple real-world examples. A young lady comes in, and she's sitting and ready to go through the gauntlet of 9 appointments in 3 hours, okay? And as you sit and visit with her, she has no overtly visual indications of her condition. And so different disciplines will come in and, hey, my name is such and such, and I'm the occupational therapist, how are you doing? And she'll say, I'm doing great, which is a great positive mental attitude. We love it. But if the physical therapist or occupational therapist doesn't probe, that's the answer we get. I'm doing great. Now, she might already have been experiencing foot drop or loss of strength in her hands. We need you guys to share with what's going on. Okay, now the medical professionals are trained to kind of probe and ask, but it's really helpful for folks to come in the door planning to tell what they're experiencing. so that number one, we know where you're at, and number two, we can affect countermeasures, okay? So again, having those questions in advance sent in, having a plan to have a discussion with these people can be really helpful for everybody, okay? You know, the people who run these clinics and so forth are very dedicated and involved, but they're also human beings. So if you've got somebody coming in who's doing really well, that's great. It's a good news for them too. You know, but we just want to get the information out so we can help. Okay? Never want to destroy a positive mental attitude, ever. Everybody familiar with the functional, the ALS Functional Rating Scale? That mean anything to you? Okay, so hopefully I'll be able to find my link, which disappeared, and put it on the screen. But it's something your medical team goes through every time you meet with them, whether they show it to you or not. Okay, youth and family. Yeah, so here's the pictures of some of these guides. Oh, there's my tabs, beautiful. So the multidisciplinary team. This one I didn't talk about, so I guess we'll go back and cover it. There are available online information for medical teams or medical professionals. So like if you or your loved one had caregivers or went to an assisted living facility, this information is for them. Okay. And let's jump to the functional rating scale. So when you're visiting a medical professional, this is what's in their head with an ALS orientation. So they're going to look at different categories: speech, saliva, swallowing, handwriting, cutting food and handling utensils, dressing and hygiene, turning in bed, adjusting bedclothes, walking, climbing stairs, and 3 categories covering respiratory issues. Okay? And it's just a snapshot. And the patient reports what their estimate of their situation is in each of these categories.
Well, what app is this, or website?
No, this is just a piece of paper.
No, what you have up on the screen.
Yes?
Can we
Oh, yeah.
access that?
Yeah, that's readily available.
And the app or website would be named?
If you just Google ALS FRS -R for ALS Functional Rating Scale, and the -R is revised. They made some change.
I lost it, so I'll get it out.
Yeah, and if you're registered with our chapter, everybody has a copy of this in our folders. And if you go to UCSD Clinic, you're going to get one handed to you when you come in the door to rate at that particular point in time where you think you are.
Would you repeat that? It was ALS
FRS, Functional Rating Scale.
Okay.
Yeah.
/
No, just all. And Google will find it in a heartbeat. So it's just a 0 to 4 rating in each of these categories. So normal speech processes, detectable speech disturbance would be a 3 out of 4. Intelligible with repeating would be a 2 out of 4. It's just a number. And you have 12 categories, so you have 48 points. And, 34 points or 26 points may be worse than 16 points. It just depends on what category the points come from. So it's just a number. It's a snapshot in time. And frankly, just to be blunt, it can be a hard read. Because if you continue past where you are to, the lower categories like 2 and 1 and 0, it's possibly projecting a potential future state. So I'd always caution people when they see this the first time, be prepared and maybe stop at where you are and go to the next one. Don't read down to 2 and 3 and 1 if it's not information you need at this point in time. Okay, but it's on there. And so then the team would have your estimate of where you're at, which is good for them. If you remember, maybe you couldn't hear this, but when you replay Dr. Ravitz's video, you know, he starts the conversation with the individual and their family by asking, well, what do you think is going on? And he goes around the room to everybody in the room who's there for the diagnostic to find out where they're at. What do they think is happening? And then that helps him guide his discussion. You know, I think it's great that people give themselves 4 in some of these categories when our medical testing and equipment suggests that maybe the situation's different, because it does reflect a positive mental attitude. So then we can still say, yeah, that's, you know, you're doing great. This therapy you might find helpful, you know, without saying, no, you're really a 2. Is that real helpful? Probably not. You know, they picked 4, that's 4. But we can still talk about countermeasures and things to help them. The good news is countermeasures for most everything on here. And that's where you connect with your medical team. First of all, talk to them. Tell them what's going on. What are your concerns? What are you having difficulty with? You know, is it you know, putting your clothes on in the morning? You're having trouble with buttons? Just talk to us. We have things we can share that might make it easier. Any other questions on the functional rating scale? Yes.
You're talking about your primary care physician. How do you find one who knows anything at all about ALS?
That can be a challenge. There's 2 answers to that. You know, we network around. This meeting, because it's webcast, we don't get a lot of in-person attendance anymore. It used to be so many people we couldn't fit in our old room. That's why we moved to this beautiful conference room provided by Lifepro Financial Services for us. The 3rd Saturday of every month, we meet at Ability Center in Kearney Mesa. That's a support group meeting where the individuals with ALS stay in one room and the caregivers go off in another room. And that's where a lot of networking happens. If you share with us your medical provider, maybe we can find another family that's with Sharp or Scripps and say, hey, here's a primary care provider they've been working with. The other thing is to challenge your long-term primary care provider. If you've been with them for a long time and you have this diagnosis, they'll go to school. Usually they will. They'll go get themselves oriented so they can properly guide you. Mm-hmm.
And that was the meeting was the 3rd week?
Yeah, every 3rd Saturday at Ability Center for disclosure purposes. I worked there for 7 years. It's a great place, but they open up their showroom for us to have our meetings on the 3rd Saturday of every month. They're closed on Saturdays, but they come in special and open up. So we have a place to meet, big enough to handle the crowd and separate into 2 groups.
Oh, that's the one that's on the 20th?
Whatever the 3rd Saturday is this month,
Oh,
It's January 19th.
January 19th this month, thank you.
What's the address, please?
4797 Ruffner Street, yeah. Is everybody getting the postcards or not yet?
I haven't yet.
Okay, we'll get you on the list. The postcards are handy because they put all that stuff on there. So you throw it on the refrigerator or on the dashboard and you know where to go when. Okay.
So, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Are there different variants
Oh.
of ALS? Because I've had
So-
a few friends, well, is this allowed to be discussed?
Yeah, just if you grab the microphone so people back home can hear you.
Okay, so,
You have to turn it on probably. Look for a green light once you push.
So, I've had a few friends expire within 30 days. And my brother-in-law he's been diagnosed for over 3 years. 5. So I'm just wondering, the disease affects the individual
Differently?
differently,
Yes. Everyone's path with this is unique.
you know?
The only one who should talk about longevity is the neurologist,
Correct.
but feel free to ask.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like I caution people on this functional rating scale, just because it's on the page in a 3, 2, and 1 area doesn't mean that you're going to experience that. Everyone's path is unique. And, you know, as Dr. Ravitz mentions, you know, people can go into what they call remission and kind of plateau for a period of time. So there's a lot of variation, and, you know, for many, many years, the statement was pretty firm, 2 to 5 years from initial symptoms. Okay, that was kind of the universal, this is what you should probably expect. And while that may be still fairly accurate for most people in the bell curve, there's an awful lot now that are exceeding the 5 years and 10 years. So I think the bell curve is starting to flatten out a little bit. I don't pretend to explain that, but I'm happy about it. Yeah. You know, there is no test for ALS. It's process of diagnosis by elimination. So some people go 6 to 18 months to get a diagnosis because the initial symptoms can mimic so many other explainable causes. And then you have to get a referral to a neurologist. That neurologist may see one person a year with ALS. So a lot of times they're smart and they punt. And they say, well, I have a theory, but you need to go see this neurologist who handles this kind of condition all the time, and let them divide and decide. But all of that takes time, you know, to go from one neurologist, get a referral to a second one, and they've got a 6-week backlog, you know, time's going by. But the other part of that is there's always the possibility that maybe they're wrong. And I have rose-tinted glasses. I'll hang on to that. In the meantime, I'll take the diagnosis and go get the equipment I need or the help I need or the therapy I need. But there's nothing wrong with me hanging on to the idea. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe it is something else. And move forward in that way. So yeah, a lot of variation. Part of I mean, when you listen to the researchers, and I'll be curious to see what they say this Saturday, more often you hear terms of a family of conditions that currently are all called ALS today, but as researchers develop, they might be developing subgroups where they can go after them differently because they're behaving differently. So we'll see what they say. But it's very complicated. You know, there's one video I was watching just yesterday where the speaker made the statement, look, if we can figure this one out, we can figure all of them out, because this is a tough nut. And if we can get this one down, watch what happens after. So, and then I think there's a ton of research going on. There's a lot of clinical trials. It's an exciting period, but there's still a lot of work to do.
So that's another question. Where is the leading research occurring at what facility?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of folks who would argue it's happening right here in Southern California. And that's a hard argument to refute. There's so much going on at UCSD, both here and in Irvine. The research that's happening in California, total. That's why these are all California researchers that get together this weekend. They also go to the international conferences and the national conferences, but there's so much happening in California that they actually have their own symposium to come together. Yeah, it's exciting. And if you look at the combined population of people with ALS, just the Golden West chapter alone has about 1,800 patients. That's the largest population of patients in one chapter nationwide. And then you add Sacramento, Orange County, and San Diego to it. Well, now you're probably at 1,800, 2,800, close to 3,000 people in that population pool right here available for clinical trials locally.
Which is another question.
Yes.
How many clinical trials are occurring and what drugs
Yeah, I'm going to punt to the clinical research team at UCSD to answer that. It's dynamic. There's so much going on. The latest information tends to be available from our national website, and they link to the Center for Disease Control, where you can literally look at every clinical trial happening. Those are exciting.
To that,
Yeah, I'll get you a link. The most important thing people can do, and I'm sure my boss is watching this, so I have to put a plug out for the Center for Disease Control National Registry. One of the things people can do to help the researchers without leaving their keyboard is to register with the National Registry.
Talking about a patient?
Yeah, a patient, and someone can do it for them, a loved one or family member, and get in the registry. Because once you're in there, you have access, and you can position your profile so that clinical trial folks can find you.
yeah, I did.
Because you want them to know what your profile is, because if you fit what they're looking for, they might reach out to you. Okay? Now, as we're talking about clinical trials,
So,
managing expectations.
just to follow up on that.
Okay?
You can
I
do-
got to use the microphone, please. Otherwise, the people back home can't hear you.
You can, what you just described, you can do this without your neurologist involved. You can go on this website yourself and register yourself and not include the neurologist and see what's available as clinical and
Oh.
put your information into the system and maybe you'll be accepted. Is that what I'm?
You can put yourself out there so that clinical trial researchers can find you. Yes, you can register yourself to be, hey, I am interested. Okay? Understand that overwhelmingly, and maybe it's 95%, maybe it's even higher, people do not qualify for a particular clinical trial. There are so many exclusionary criteria that we need to manage expectations and just understand that's how it works. So it can be extremely frustrating. And we just had a recent case that was devastating. There was a mistake or an omission at the intake. So this person went through probably 6 to 8 months in line for a clinical trial, got on the wait list, got up to like 12 or 14 on the wait list, where now they're calling and saying, hey, we're almost ready, let's get you in. And then one of the key pieces of information, the simple birth date, they were never part of the clinical trial. They were already too old. But somebody missed that, and for 6 or 8 months led this poor person on that they were going to get in. That's the worst one I've heard of in 12 years. So it can be devastating. You think you're in, you don't know if you're going to get the placebo or the real, that stuff still. But to be crushed like that after so much time was just unconscionable. So, I'm sorry?
And the clinical trials are very expensive, I found.
Well, again, I'll punt to the clinical researchers. In my experience, the trials are funded in a way to mitigate the expense to the participants as much as possible. Now, if you live in El Centro and you're driving to La Jolla and the reimbursement for travel is $40, you're probably not covering your expenses, But they do make an attempt to have people participate without incurring a huge financial burden. They're very conscious of that issue. And there are clinical trials that are funded to the point where they can fly people from different parts of the country to a university who's participating in the trial to collect the specimens or data. So you see that happening. There's some trials happening here that are happening simultaneously across the country at different universities. So they can coordinate that, okay? So if we come full circle on navigating information on ALS, the one thing, again, I'd like you to take home is talk to your medical team. share with them what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing to enable them to better help you, okay? And if you have experimental treatments that you want to try, again, share that with your primary care provider. Talk to your neurologist. My experience is if the procedure or the diet or what have you or the vitamins are not going to do any harm, then the medical community is fairly supportive of it. Because for you, it might be helpful. You know, there may not be data that says this is going to help 100 people, but if it helps one and it works for that person, well, why would anybody hold that back? But again, I would ask, and if it's promises to be too true, if there's a lot of cash required up front, be very skeptical. We have a whole webinar from about a year ago on Food and Drug Administration and fraud on medical treatments. So if you're going to go down that path, please watch the webinar or ask, talk to people. There's an awful lot. We had 3 families in 2017, spent $90,000 collectively on 3 treatments that weren't worth anything. And one of the 3 were actually harmed by the effort. So there's stuff out there. I went through this back in 1999 with my sister, and she had 5 brothers and 3 sisters, and we pulled together and we said to the medical team, hey, you know, what is out there? We've got resources. We'll spend. And so I know what it's like. You're under pressure. You're desperate. And you want to do something. And I know for me as a guy, what I want to do is write a check. I want to solve a problem. I want to, you know, and just smash it. And oftentimes, that's not available to us. We can't just make it go away that way. And but you become emotionally involved where you're susceptible to someone promising you, hey, if you do this, it's gonna work. You know, just give me $15,000 and then we'll schedule it. And that's when you got to put your hand up. When they're asking for the money up front, you got to get concerned, because how legit is it? Again, talk to your medical team. Tell them what you're thinking about, what you want to try. And the other thing for our chapter, one of my mantras that I repeat is, don't buy anything. Call me first. I have a huge durable medical equipment loan closet. If you want to try something first, maybe I have it, you can borrow it. And then if you really like it and you need 3 of them, you can go buy a couple. That's okay.
I'm sorry.
Like walkers, scooters, canes, power chairs, the whole gamut. And our loan closet exists to cover the gap between when something might be helpful or needed and when that person's insurance gets around to providing it. Because in this case, depending on the rate of progression, sometimes when we need something, we need it now. And the insurance industry might get around to it in 6 or 8 weeks. So we exist with that loan closet to fill that gap. Okay, so once your medical team issues a prescription for a particular device, we'll let you borrow it until yours shows up.
You're going to pass out business cards? Or?
Yeah, there's a whole stack of them on the back.
Oh, okay.
And I can put that back up on the screen if I can get back to my photos. See if I know how to do that here. And if you're traveling different parts of the country, let us know. We have 39 chapters nationwide. Obviously, a lot of people come visiting to San Diego, so we provide equipment on a temporary basis for those folks. And when our folks travel somewhere else, we call on that chapter and say, hey, can you help us out? Meet them at the hotel with this device or that so that they can maximize their visit. Yeah, so yeah, there's hard copies in the back, and now my business cards on the screen, yeah, so.
I guess the other question would be regarding insurance for people with diagnosed with ALS right
The
now?
health insurance, life insurance.
Health insurance?
Health insurance, mm-hmm.
So right now, he's with Kaiser? But does the ALS Association offer any connection to a health provider, insurance provider?
Not in the sense that I think you're asking, but we would provide locally to that individual's specific state, because insurance is very different state to state. So we'd connect them with an insurance advisor in their home territory to review their current insurance and their options to make sure they have the right insurance in place to cover the potential needs going forward. Here in San Diego, we have a gentleman who's been volunteering with us for about 12 years. Any good insurance broker who's familiar with health insurance, medical insurance, and catastrophic or terminal diseases should be able to give you guidance and know what questions to ask. If you're going on Medicare, what supplements do you need? You know, it's Medicare and supplement B. Well, should I have D, G, E, and F? Right. Well, shoot, some people don't know D, G, and F even exist and that they're an option.
I didn't know.
But it's totally normal for people not to know. But you want somebody who knows to guide you so that you don't miss an opportunity to buy a supplemental for $20 or $80 a month that saves you $8,000, $20,000 a year in impact. You know, something like a 20% durable medical equipment deductible on a $40,000 wheelchair, that's $8,000. And you got to come up with it if you don't have the supplemental insurance that covers that copay. You know, those things become huge numbers very quickly if you're not your insurance in place ahead of time. So, okay. Any other questions from our live on-site audience?
One other question. I mean, this is an individual case, I understand, but how many people are in your family? He's my brother-in-law. This is his sister. He's got a brother up in the Bay Area. There's another brother-in-law in North Carolina, and the father's still surviving. And everyone is under, let's see, how should I put this? Well, they don't think he should be driving. So I know that's up to the neurologist to withdraw his license and tell the DMV, but he's resistant to that. And everybody in the family can't believe his license hasn't been pulled yet. Because his left arm is atrophied. He can't even use it.
Right.
Now it's going into his legs. He's got braces on his legs. I'm going, you're going to get an accident, and God knows what's going to happen after that.
Right.
Yeah.
So interesting thing with that, you know, it can be pretty devastating to a patient-physician relationship if we wait for the neurologist or the primary care physician to take the keys away. So I'd have a discussion with the primary care provider, or, you know,
We're going to do that in March.
well, and just say, you know what do they recommend? Because they might share with you what I just said, that, hey, if I do this, my relationship with him is going to be compromised.
It will be compromised. I'm
No
not-
question about it. Somebody's got to be the bad guy.
I'm not.
And you don't necessarily want it to be your neurologist or your primary care physician, but somebody's got to do it.
No, I
Yeah.
think
But it's a tough situation.
I would not do it.
The best thing that can happen is for, you know, a gentle intervention where he realizes, yeah, I need to, for my own safety and the safety of others, I need to stop driving. And sometimes the way you enter that is providing alternatives
Well, yeah.
so that he doesn't feel like it's, you know, the end of his independence. But it's a delicate issue. But I would challenge the family not to force it back on the medical team. I mean, they'll do it when they have to, but it's not a positive thing going forward for that relationship.
Yeah. He's not. His son lives with him, So he does the majority of the driving.
Yeah. But in America, driving is independence.
I know.
You take that away
Yeah,
from me.
I'm not taking
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So we had a situation out in La Mesa, very similar situation. And it turned out the most of the time, the person was going from their house literally 3/4 of a mile away
That's-
where there's a strip mall and all these places to go. And so for me, it was like, well, here, I don't have to address this issue head on. I'll just provide an alternative. So we hooked him up with a sweet, kind of nice looking power chair that had a 10-mile range. He could go that strip mall back and forth 4 times a day and have plenty of juice left. And he made the switch. Never, we didn't take away the car and the keys, but we provided him a way to get to where he wanted to go.
Mobility.
And then he was happy camper because he could manage his power chair. So I think it always helps in those situations to have solutions for them, so that they don't feel like it's punitive or one thing I'll share that the psychiatrists and psychologists tell us: when you're experiencing ALS and you as an individual notice a loss of function, whether it means I can't pick up my pen anymore or my left leg is not where it used to be, whatever they notice, they're going to process through the 5 stages of grief. And then if the progression's moving, they're at stage 3 on one issue, stage 1 on some new thing they just noticed, and they're on stage 5 on something that happened a few weeks ago, all at the same time. That's an incredible mental burden that whether we recognize it or not, or they express it or not, they're processing that. They're going through that. And so we just have to know that and recognize there's a lot going on that maybe they're not even sharing, but the psychiatrists and the psychologists tell us they're dealing with it every day, so. Well, okay, we're going to wrap this up for the webcast. Oh, sorry, one more question. If you could pass the microphone back to the table behind you. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's anyone that can sit down with a caregiver and kind of go over what the caregiver's planned or is trying to, to make sure that they're not missing anything, or.
Yeah, actually, in the longer version of this presentation, that's still in my mind for next time, there's a whole section on caregiving. So we do have, I didn't bring them today, but we do have wonderful guides for caregivers. One of the focus you'll find at a multidisciplinary clinic is that they are very much interested in the caregiver, not just the patient. Because if something happens to the caregiver, this whole situation just gets a lot harder. And if you look at the data nationwide, oftentimes caregivers get in trouble ahead of the patient they're caring for, due to stress and burnout and different issues. So a lot of material on caregiving. We'll get that to you, make it available. And we often tell folks, find the information. Register with the ALS Association. Register with the Muscular Dystrophy Association. ALS is one of the 41 or 43 diseases that they get involved with. They have, an inch and a half thick Living with ALS guide for people with ALS and for caregiving. Tremendous resource. So and there's caregiving training throughout San Diego almost every week. And then some of it is targeted to neuromuscular disease. So it's more specific to what our population is going through. And we have caregiving guides specific to ALS available. So definitely. So coming up in 2019, I'll give you a little advance notice. I'm hearing about 4 different golf tournaments for those who want to participate and support that way. We have a fiesta, our 4th annual fiesta on May 23rd coming up. That's just an evening gala with silent auction and live auction, and they're a fundraiser. And that'll probably be at one of the local casinos. So there might be some opportunity to go to that event and then stay the rest of the night doing whatever you do. We've got our Walk to Defeat ALS again in October. That's the largest support meeting of the year. And I'm sure I'm missing some other events. Ice Bucket in August, yeah, every August till occur. Yeah, it's kind of dissipated a little bit, especially on when you get away from Boston, where it started. It gets us far out. But yeah, some people still do it. Still cool. We appreciate that. Every drop counts is their mantra. And that'll be to August. And we've had advocacy in, I think it's June this year, where people from across all 39 chapters nationwide go to Washington and keep us on their radar screen. So a lot of exciting things coming up in 2019. We also have our Passes for Pals, which you may or may not be aware of, where we try and arrange events like at Point Loma, up at the Lighthouse, Birch Aquarium. We do a flagship cruise out on the bay. Some people stay for 2 hours. Some people get off after 1. It's totally fine. But those are fun events. Probably do a baseball game, whether it's Padres or one of the colleges. I don't know yet, but we'll see. I think this will be the 80th anniversary of Lou Gehrig's speech this year. And a lot happening. So watch your mail, watch your email, look for those postcards. We'll keep you informed of what's going on and how you can participate and network with other families. Okay? All right. So our audio technician, gentlemen, should be coming back in a minute. I think I can shut it off here. I'm going to try. I guess if nothing else, I can shut off my mic, huh? So until he pulls the trigger, the camera's still live, but it's going to be displaying my business card. Oops, not anymore. It's announcement for people.
What's your doggy's name?
Daisy.
Daisy.
He reminds me of Basenji.
Real pretty, Chinese? Japanese?
Korean.
Korean. Oh. How are you, Daisy? You keep your mommy all happy?
She's great.
I know. We got one now, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Keith.
You're very welcome.